Hey gang, how you doing? Welcome back. It is February 27th, so I am cutting it close under the wire with this video. I probably should have done last week. Honestly, I probably should have done last week. But laziness just got the best of me. And I wanted to do this video all month, and I just kept putting it off, and then I woke up and it was like February 27th, and I was like, bitch, get your shit together. So yeah, we are going to talk about my favorite books by African American authors for Black History Month. So let's get to it. Yeah, so I don't have time to waste because like I said in my intro, it's February 27th, and if I want this up by at least tomorrow, I need to get with it. So we're just gonna get right to it and jump right into this list of my favorite books by African American authors. This list is in no particular order except the last book. I'm saving my absolute favorite book last, and once we get there, you'll figure out why. I'll tell you why. But yeah, this list is in no particular order. I don't even remember how many books are on this list, but since it's in no real order, it doesn't matter. Who cares? I'm gonna shut up now. Let's do this. All right, we are going to start with the memoir Rabbit by Patricia Williams, who is a Black female comedian. She goes by the stage name Miss Pat. But her birth name is Patricia Williams, and she wrote this memoir, and it is tragic and hilarious and just so poignant and honest and real. And there are moments where you're so happy for her and you're so sad for her, and just she really is honest about how she grew up in poverty and her generational trauma and generational curses, and what it means to be a overweight, dark-skinned Black woman, and the male validation that she sought after at a very, very young age, and the violent and sexual things she was exposed to at a very young age. And she does it all in this very honest and true and hilarious voice. I mean, I wouldn't expect anything different from a comedian, even telling their own tragic story, even talking about their own childhood traumas. I would still expect some levity, and she delivers. It's great. It's honestly, and I love memoirs, and it's one of my favorite ones. And so I strongly suggest that if you're interested in laughing through your tears, then you pick up Patricia Williams' Rabbit. Next on this list is Alex Haley's Queen. If you don't know, Alex Haley wrote Roots, and which was later adapted into a miniseries, and so was his book Queen. The whole title is called Alex Haley's Queen, but that was also adapted into a miniseries starring Jasmine Guy, Tim Daly, Martin Sheen, and Halle Berry, who plays the titular character Queen. I cannot remember which member of Alex Haley's family she is. By the way, Roots and Queen are generational family sagas, generational stories told about Alex Haley's family. And I cannot remember who Queen is to him. I am so sorry. I'm embarrassed. I can't remember if she is his great-grandmother or great-great-grandmother. But anyway, she is a very, very light-skinned Black woman, to the point where she is white passing. The reason for that being that she's the product of sexual assault. Her mother was a slave, played by Jasmine Guy in the miniseries, and her father was her owner, who was played by Tim Daly in the miniseries. And the story is just, in both the miniseries and the book, is just about her life, her attempts at passing, her attempts at not passing. At one point, she's thrown into a mental hospital, her recovery from that, her attempts to, be accepted amongst her community as a Black woman, being so white passing and being a product of sexual assault, But yeah, it's this really big, thick family saga, just like Roots, of you just following her life. You spend a good portion of the book um, with uh, her family that comes before her. Like you don't really meet Queen until I want to say about a third into the book, and then the rest of it, the next two thirds of the book, are essentially about her and her growing up and her progression and the tragic things that happened to her and her attempts to be accepted within her own community, her attempts to pass within the white community, and the consequences of all that, and essentially eventually hopefully her happiness and what leads up to which is essentially Alex Haley himself being born into this family. So big epic family saga, drama, literary fiction. It's fantastic. I strongly suggest you read it. You do not need to read Roots to read to get anything from Queen. They are essentially telling the same story, but different aspects of it. So, but really great. Absolutely loved it. I read it. I think when I graduated high school. I think after I graduated high school, I was like, why have I not read this? I've seen the miniseries. Why have I not read this? So I got my shit together, read it, absolutely loved it. I will warn you though, the miniseries glamorizes the relationship between Tim Daly's character and Jasmine Guy's character, his slave and her master. They try to make it romantic, and we all know that shit more than likely was not. Next up, we have The Women of Brewster Place by Gloria Naylor. I absolutely love this book, and I love the miniseries that it was adapted into by Harpo Productions, which is Oprah Winfrey's production company. And she stars in the miniseries as well, along with Lynn Whitfield and Jack A. And, oh man, who else is in this? Paul Winfield is in it. I can't remember who else. It doesn't matter. We're here to talk about the book, not the miniseries, although you should watch the miniseries as well. It's about these interconnected stories, these histories of a group of Black women who move into this it's not an apartment building. Well, it is an apartment building. It's not like an apartment complex. It's like a brownstone. It's like a brownstone with multiple places, and how they all got there with it's about their past and their present, who these women are, how they ended up there, and who they are presently, and what they're going through with their children, with the men in their lives, with their jobs, and essentially their neighborhood. Like a huge character in this book is their neighborhood, Brewster Place. It's where they live, and crime and poverty have just taken over and has just infected the whole neighborhood and therefore infected them. And it's just this really great look at all these beautiful Black women and their stories, and who they are and how they got there and what they're hoping to be in the future. And the ending is just so great. It's so powerful, and I just absolutely love it. I just absolutely love it. And it's about their relationship with each other, and how sometimes it's contentious, and some of them are friends, and some of them their friendships are cracking. And God, I don't think I ever read a book that felt that I don't know. It just I feel like calling it powerful feels ridiculous, but also feels it's so accurate. It really is something that completely touched me. And again, just like Alex Haley's Queen, I saw the miniseries before I read the book, and I saw myself. That's what it is. I saw myself in it, and as a Black woman, and I understood these women, and I understood their motivations, and I understood their tragedies and their heartbreaks and their happinesses, and just like, oh, it's so good. It's so good. Next up is I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. It is an autobiography written by her. I read it my freshman year of high school. It was a signed reading. I'm gonna be honest. At the time, I mean, I was excited that we were reading a book by African American woman, but I wasn't really thrilled that it was like a memoir. I didn't really care. But honestly, like, um, I just couldn't put it down once I picked it up. I loved it. I thought it was fucking great. Afterwards, of course, in high school when you read the book, when you're all done and you're complete, you watch the adaptation of it. So we watched the movie, but the movie wasn't all that true to um, the book, which was disappointing. But anyway, that aside, yeah, Maya Angelou's biography, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, is one of the best books I've ever read in my entire life. I um, just like the Women of Brewster Place, it's just this beautiful telling of all the happy, sad, tragic, unfortunate things that have happened in her life, but have made her her and led her to where she is, which is quite possibly, not even quite possibly, but one of the absolute best poets and writers ever, ever to have walked this tainted earth. Like, her work is just essential and beautiful and brilliant, and like, I loved her memoir. I thought it was really great. I thought it was really fantastic. So yeah, it's the story of her life, the very complicated story of her life. And just, trigger warning, if you do read I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, there is sexual assault of a minor that happens early in the book. But, like I said, there are happy, sad, tragic, unfortunate, gleeful, and hopeful moments in the book, that, Miss Maya Angelou has decidedly to share with us. And I urge and strongly support that, and urge and strongly support anyone who decides to pick up that book and read it. Next up is Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry by Mildred D. Taylor. I read this book in elementary school and I absolutely loved it. It is pretty dark and deep for elementary school, but it is a middle grade book. It's made for that age group. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a part of Mildred D. Taylor's Logan Family series, kind of like how Alex Haley has his whole Roots series with Roots and Queen. She has, but her Mildred D. Taylor's is fictional, whereas Alex Haley is writing about his own family, like generations of his family. Mildred D. Taylor's is fictional, but the subject matter is very fucking real and very honest. And it's Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry is the second book, I believe, in her like Logan Family series, which follows like this black sharecropping family in the South, and it ends very sadly. I don't know why people think the ending is hopeful. The end of that book is actually pretty scary and terrifying. But I know a lot of people who said that this was like assigned reading to them in like 6th grade, as it was for me. And I think it was actually assigned reading to me in 4th. I think Miss Rowell had us reading that. But Miss Rowell is black, and she wanted us to read a lot of black literature in her class, which I thoroughly appreciated. But anyway, in the book, Taylor explores struggles of African Americans in 1930s Mississippi through the perspective of 9-year-old Cassie Logan. That's right. That was another reason why I absolutely love the book in the 4th grade, is that it was told through a young black girl's perspective. And being a young black girl myself at the time, I absolutely loved reading something through the eyes of someone who looked like me and quite possibly felt the same things that I felt. The novel contains several themes, including Jim Crow segregation, black land ownership, sharecropping, Great Depression, and lynching. Yeah, all of that. I do remember all of that in the book, and yes, 4th grade, you're 10 years old, and that's a lot of heavy stuff to carry and to read. But I appreciated being exposed to that and reading it, and I loved reading all that really hard, difficult, dark stuff through the eyes of like a girl who was my age and looked like me, and how she perceived things and interpret them and internalize them and externalize them. So Yeah, I loved that book. I still own the copy that was given to me in fourth grade. I never returned it because I loved it so much and kept it. It's not here with me in Seattle. It is at my mother's house in New Jersey. She called me ages ago and was like, "What am I supposed to do all this stuff? Like, especially all these books." I was like, "Don't throw any of my books away. Don't throw any of my stuffed animals away. Everything else is trash. Everything else is trash. You get rid of the dollhouse. You can donate it. I don't care, but don't get rid of any of my books." And I remember that Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry is amongst the tons of books that I still have in my mother's attic in a box that I need to go pick up. So yeah, thinking about it now, I kind of want to ask her to mail my ship. Like, can you mail me Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry? I want to reread it. I want to reread it. But yeah, that's a fantastic book. Next up is another family saga. Apparently, African American family sagas are my fucking thing. It is called Cane River by Lalita Tademi. Lolita Tademi. I I love that book. I started reading that book around the time my husband and I just started dating. So I want to say 2000. We started dating around 2005, but I think I started reading it around like 2006. So yeah, I read that book around 2006. Um, so I don't ramble. Let me read you the blurb on Wikipedia, which will do it a lot more justice than I will. Okay, beginning with her great 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 grandmother, Elizabeth, a slave owned by a Creole family, Lolita Tademi's historical fiction novel chronicles four generations of strong, determined black women as they battle injustice to unite their family and forge success on their own terms. Okay, let me stop right there really quick. Yeah, I do remember when I was reading this book being a little bit confused because it was called historical fiction, but it was also based on Lolita Tademi's family. So I think it was just like, I think she was piecing together stuff she knew and filling in the blanks with, exaggerated or, writer's license. I think that's what was happening. And I think that's why I was like, when I first started the book, I was kind of confused as to exactly if this was true or not. What was fact, what was fiction. There are women whose lives begin in slavery, who weather the Civil War, who grapple with contradictions of emancipation, Jim Crow, and the pre-civil rights South. The culture she explores, that of slaves who remained in bondage until after the American Civil War, bears some core similarities but radical dissimilarities to that of Cane River's Melrose St. Augustine Society, whose family had lived as free whose family had lived as free from the late Spanish period of Louisiana history. That's right. That was another thing that I thought was really interesting about the book, is that most of the book was about these freed slaves living in Louisiana. A lot of them were either white passing or biracial or freed people of color, and I mean, I was fully aware of them. That's particularly in Louisiana, but it was really awesome, kind of reading what life was like for freed people of color post Civil War, particularly in Louisiana, because even though Louisiana had very restrictive laws, they still enforced a lot of hateful, anti-black, and very racist rules, regulations, laws, violations, everything. They had this tone in Louisiana that was very much, I want to say, lax in particular areas when it came to freed people of color. A lot of it due to the fact that a lot of Creole black people lived there, and the reason a lot of Creole black people lived there is because they were all products of sexual assault between slaves and their masters. So there was a lot of, for lack of better phrasing, or mulatto black people who lived in Louisiana, and were members of even their own high society within it. So it was just really fascinating to read that, and the relationships that they had with each other, with darker skinned black people who were freed or were not freed. and the white people around them. So yeah, Cane River, really great. Absolutely loved it. Sugar by Bernice L. McFadden. I talked about The Warmest December, which I read in December, by Bernice L. McFadden, how wonderful, amazing that book was, and how I knew of her because I read her book, Sugar, ages ago, 1,000 years ago. It's very similar to The Color Purple, but there are some very, significant differences, particularly in character and plot, which I appreciate. Sugar is about this lonely, kind of frumpy black woman living in the South during, I want to say, I think it's post World War II. So, like, late 40s, early 50s. I have to double check that. um, who meets this woman who is just fantastic and glamorous, and she just wants to know her, and she's fascinated by her, and they become friends. And the book is about their friendship and how it develops and grows, and how she comes out of her shell, um, just simply by knowing this other woman who has just awakened her and sparked things in her and let her know that she's still beautiful, that she is beautiful, and she deserves romance and passion and love and desire and, happiness. And I absolutely love it. I just absolutely love that the book is just about these two women coming together, and having each other's backs and needing each other and being each other's soulmate. Okay, so I don't think I did a decent enough summarization of Sugar. I don't think I did it justice, so let me really, real quick, read you the Amazon, like, little blurb about it. A young prostitute comes to Bigelow, Arkansas to start over from from her haunting past. Sugar moves next door to Pearl, who is still grieving for the daughter who was murdered 15 years before. Over sweet potato pie, an unlikely friendship begins, transforming both women's lives and the lives of the entire town. That's essentially what I said. That's it. I said a woman comes to town and this frumpy and helps this frumpy other woman, climb out of her shell, and they form a friendship. That's essentially what I said. Amazon said it better, but that's essentially what I said. Okay, next up is The Color Purple by Alice Walker. I worship this book. It is amazing. It is incredible. I love the movie adaptation. I love this book. It is an epistolary novel. It's an epistolary novel where the main character Cece is writing letters to God, telling God all the things that is happening in her life. And Cece has a difficult, tragic, and sad life. Like, I don't want to give anything away if you haven't read it, but just know that there is sexual assault of a minor, incest, domestic violence, kidnapping, racism, um, racist brutality in the book. There's damn near everything in this book. And I understand that that might be extremely hard to read. But it is worth it because it is brilliant and it is amazing. But I will tell you this, I will give this away. The ending is good. It is a very happy ending. Does it make up for all the tragedy you had to read beforehand to get to that? Maybe not. Sometimes there are times when I think so when it comes to this book, and there are times when I don't. There are times when I'm just like, is this enough? Should should did I call her Cece? I'm sorry, I meant Celie. Shouldn't Celie like win the lotto or be the queen of an island or something? With all the shit she went through, I feel like there is more in the world she deserves than this. But then I understand that that's exactly what the book is about. It's about the simplicity of the things that she wanted and was denied. Like, just simply because she existed, and simply because the people in her life needed to hate something instead of themselves, and hate and took out all their self-hatred and their disappointment and their anger on this one woman who didn't deserve it, and how fucking strong she was throughout it. Like, even the parts where you think she's being weak or she thinks she's being weak, you're like, no, sis, you were going through it, because it couldn't have been me. I either would have unalived myself or unalived everybody around me, causing me this pain. Like, oh God. And how even throughout all of it, even through all the people that have hurt her, she still manages on some level to care about them and try to do right by them. Oh, read this book. Read this book. It's so, oh God, it's probably the strongest book I've ever fucking read. And I mean strong in the sense that, like, it just, it like grabbed the insides of me and just squeezed and twisted and kept me there. And like, God, I cry when I read this book and watch the movie, and I cry out of just like empathy, and I cry out of happiness when, you know, Celie finally gets a touch of goodness in her life. It's just, oh. I love this book. I love this book. I love this book so much. The adaptation is great. The only thing that myself and I know a lot of people over the years have commented on the adaptation. The only issue, the only one thing that we have about it is that there is strong queer elements in the book that are heavily downplayed in the adaptation. I don't see that as a fault of the actors or Steven Spielberg himself. He does a phenomenal job directing this, or the writing with who I believe Quincy Jones wrote the script, which is fascinating. Wait, did Quincy Jones write it? Did he write or produce? Oh fuck, it doesn't matter. I don't think it's the fault of any of the writer, the director, or the actors. It's the studio's fault, and it's also the fault of the fact that this film was released in 1989. So that's why a lot of queer aspects of it, the heavily implied queer aspects of the book, don't translate into the movie. But it's still, in my opinion, even though that's disappointing, the movie is still an incredible watch. The Color Purple adaptation is probably in my top 10 of favorite movies of all time. Yeah, I can't say any more about it other than get your ass up, go to the fucking bookstore, and buy The Color Purple by Alice Walker. The last two books on my list here are Toni Morrison books. Toni Morrison is my favorite author of all time. I absolutely adore her as a author and as a human being. I have yet to see that documentary about her that was released right before she passed away, which was unfortunate. And I think it was produced by Oprah. But Toni Morrison is a goddess, or she was a goddess to me. A lot of people, when they talk Toni Morrison, talk about these two books. Beloved seems to be the one that edges out a little bit more as amongst people's favorite. I do love Beloved. The Bluest Eye is my absolute favorite novel of all time. It is my absolute favorite Toni Morrison novel. It is my absolute favorite African American literature novel. It is my favorite novel written by a woman. It is my favorite novel written by a Black person. I love The Bluest Eye, and we will get to what that is about, but let's talk about Beloved first. Beloved is a it is a supernatural literary fiction. Okay, so Beloved tells the story of a woman who escapes slavery. She was repeatedly raped and abused when she was a slave, and she eventually escapes to, I think, Ohio? Is it? I think it's, I was about to say Cleveland, but I think it's Cincinnati. I think it's Cincinnati, Ohio that she escapes to. And she escapes with her daughters. And her home starts to become riddled with this supernatural activity, and you find out that later why that is. So, and it's based off, yeah, it's based off a true story about a woman who escaped slavery and was later found, and they were attempting to take her back to the plantation that she had escaped from, her and her children that she ran off with. And in order to avoid all that, she killed her children so they wouldn't suffer the horrors of slavery. Like, she would rather murder her own children. She would rather be killed herself than return to being a slave. That's how horrific slavery was, is, and that's how horrific it was for her. She would rather murder her own children and you know, die at the hands of her captors than to go back to that. And Toni Morrison's Beloved is based on that story. God, it's so good. It's so fucking good. It's so fucking good. It's honestly, I mean, I understand why everybody thinks it's Toni Morrison's best novel. I have no issue with that. I take no qualms with it. It just so happens that The Bluest Eye is my favorite piece of her work. But it's to say it's sad is an understatement. But it's just so strong and so gut wrenching and so powerful and so brilliant. And it's just it's amazing. I love it. It's quite possibly one of the best books ever written of all time. It really is. It really, truly, truly fucking is. And if my little summary was clear enough for you to understand or get the gist of what the story is about, that and that interests you, then yes. I don't give a fuck where you get this book. Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, you half price books. I don't give a shit where you get it. Just get it, read it, come back here and talk to me about it, because I want to talk about it. I love talking about this book. I love it. It's fucking amazing. Toni Morrison was in her bag when she wrote that, man. Let me tell you. She had a story to tell. She had a song in her heart and she was going to sing it, and she sang it well. And yeah, it's it ain't a fun read, but it's a good read. It's a great read. It's a fucking fantastic read. And last up, like I said, is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. I bawled my eyes out the first time I read this book. Cried like there was no tomorrow. I felt so fucking seen by this book. I felt seen and heard and understood and hugged and loved. And despite how the book ends, because it's not a happy ending, I still felt those things. I still felt things that I wasn't able to articulate and express was articulated and expressed back to me with these words, and it moved the fuck out of me. It's the first Toni Morrison book I ever even read, and it shook me to my fucking core. And whenever anyone says, what's your favorite book of all time, and I always, no hesitation, The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. So The Bluest Eye tells the story of Pecola. The book takes place post Great Depression, so like 30s, not quite 40s, so I think mid-late 30s. But yeah, it tells the story of Pecola, who is a very dark-skinned young black girl. And she has very coarse hair, and she has very buck teeth, and you know, she's just she is not conventionally Eurocentric attractive, even by 1930s standards. And she sees how her lack of physical beauty invites horrible people to do and say horrible things to her. And in order to alleviate that, to gain some happiness, some time away from her pain and all that she is enduring, from those who were supposed to care about her to those who could give a shit about her to fucking strangers, she believes that the thing that would fix all that, that will grant her some sort of power and happiness in her life, is if she had blue eyes. Because one day she sees on the street this blonde-haired, blue-eyed little white girl who is just adored by everyone who comes within contact of her. And she's immediately fascinated and jealous and enthralled by all these interactions with that girl. And she thinks, she boils it all down. Her young mind boils it all down to the girl having blue eyes. Because the girl had the bluest, prettiest, sparkly eyes she's ever seen. So she believes if she had eyes like that, she'd get the love that she so desperately deserves and needs in her life. So she prays and prays day and night for God to turn her eyes blue, like that girl's. And of course, it's a very Santa Claus childish wish. She is a child, so, we're not going to hold that against her. Her worldview's this big. But, we as a reader, as adults, understand that and feel for her. And we feel for her as we realize that her wish, her dream is never going to come true. And as we're reading the book, things just become progressively worse for her. And like Celie in The Color Purple, all this girl did was exist. That's it. That's all she did was exist. But for some reason, her mother and her father and her siblings and strangers just feel the need or desire to treat her like shit, like she's not human, like she's not worthy of love, care, and respect. And again, she is aware enough to know that the things that people say and do to her aren't right and aren't fair. But she believes that they do these things because she's not beautiful. And if she just had blue sparkly eyes, she'd be so gorgeous and no one would ever treat her like that again. Woo! And it just, that's what the book's about. You're just you're just reading about this innocent, sweet girl who just wants this one thing in order to get this other thing, which is love and kindness in her life. And it's just horrible reading her desire this thing that she's not going to get, and watch as things actually get progressively worse for her. And like I said, the ending is not a happy ending. It reaches this apex of just, tragedy and unfortunateness. The first time I read it, because the ending is written, the ending isn't written in prose. It's very stream of consciousness. And once you read the book, you understand why the last chapter is written in that stream of consciousness and what's happening, what's going on. And the first time I read it, I just didn't understand why we were switching writing styles. And I didn't understand what exactly was going on and what exactly is happening in her head. And once I got it, that's when the waterworks for days. That's when that happened. Do I wish this book had a happy ending? Of course I do. Do I understand why it doesn't? Do I accept that? Am I okay with that? It doesn't? Absolutely. because, especially for little black girls, it it doesn't end that way for you. You don't always get a happy ending, and you especially don't get one when society tells you you don't deserve it, and you especially don't get one when the people in your life add more pain to it, and when strangers don't find you worthy enough to give you anything, a piece of happiness, not even a smile on the street. So, yeah, pretty sad and depressing read. But that book really, really did touch me in a way no book ever has. Okay, so that is it. That is my favorite African American literature books for Black History Month. Thank you guys so much for stopping by and listening to me ramble about how much I love books by my kinfolk. And the particular books I love by Black people, and what they're about and what they have to say, and how much they meant to me and why they mean so much to me, and so forth and so on. And I hope that whether you are a woman of color, whether you are a person of color, whether you're BIPOC or not, you decide to pick up one of these books and read them, because I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that they're great and that they're incredible, and that even though they're not written by people who look like you, or the characters don't necessarily look like you, it doesn't mean that certain things aren't universal and you can't connect. So I have to go and cook dinner now, so I'm going to shut up and tell you guys first, though, to wash your hands, wash your face, take care of your feet, get vaccinated, get your booster, and stay safe out there. Okay? Love you guys so much.